Welcome to Let the Boys Kiss, the creation of queer ships, where we ask the question, is it queer baiting, queer coding, or queer canon?
This week we'll be revisiting the MCU. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kelsey.
Here we are, back in Marvel Land.
So I think we mentioned this at the end of our last episode, but we've gotten a number of requests over
the years
months,
at this point.
the months, to do several MCU ships that we have not covered to date. So we thought we'd just do a bunch of them all at once. So who are we covering today?
So we've got a couple of Tony ships. We're going to do Tony and Bruce, or the Science Bros, and Tony and Steve, or Stony. And then we also have a couple Fem/slash ships. So we're going to do Peggy and Natasha. And then we're also going to do Agatha and Rio from the new series, Agatha All Along. And I say new loosely because it came out like 6 months ago at this point.
Yeah, newish. So we'll be looking at, for the Tony ships, I think, broadly. We watched Avengers. I rewatched Age of Ultron. I don't think you did.
No.
And then
but
we watched
I have seen it before.
Of course.
Yeah.
We've seen all of these things. And we've rewatched Captain America Civil War. Mm-hmm. And then for Peggy Natasha, that comes up in 2 episodes of What If. So we watched What If the Watcher Broke His Oath, and What If Captain Carter Fought the Hydra Stomper? A question we all have.
A question for the ages, honestly.
And then we watched all 9 episodes of Agatha All Along. So that's our content. And not unlike episodes, we're going to walk through these ships individually, kind of go through our whole process. We're going to group the Tony ships. And then, we'll see what's going on with queerness in the MCU and give Tony a little bit of attention. Our MCU episodes to date have been more Steve-focused when we could have been talking about Tony.
They've really been more Bucky-focused, honestly, because we've done Steve and Bucky, and then we've done Bucky and Sam.
You know, you're right. They have been more Bucky-focused, which relates to Tony in some ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to start with the Tony ships. The Tony ships.
We should preface, these ships obviously exist outside of the MCU in comic books, etc., but as we usually do on the show, our purview is the movie. So we're going to run through these ships on a movie-by-movie basis. So we'll go Avengers, Ultron, Civil War.
Okay. So, quickly, The Avengers, in case you're not familiar, listener, is a film where a bunch of superheroes that have been established in their own movies team up to fight an alien invasion led by Loki, Thor's adopted brother.
Yep. But you all know that. So the group that is assembled includes, for the purposes of this conversation, Tony Stark, Iron Man, Bruce Banner, the Hulk, and I almost said Bucky, but no.
And it's not Bucky.
Steve Rogers, Captain America. So we will see how the 3 of them all interact. Avengers is the first time that they all meet/interact with each other. So we're establishing their dynamics in that one.
Very exciting.
What are their dynamics like?
Okay, so they have different dynamics. Tony and Bruce are just getting along from the jump. Tony's so excited to meet another smart guy. He's like, oh my gosh, we should hang.
Oh my god, you're so smart. I'm so smart. Let's chill. It's gonna be awesome.
He doesn't seem worried at all about the Hulk. He's like, that's part of you. Cool. Let's hang out.
Yeah, it is truly just like good vibes for the 2 of them.
Yeah, it's very sweet. When they first meet, Tony says to Bruce, "Shall we play, Doctor?" Cute. Yeah.
Then they're working in a lab together on something, and it's quite flirty. Like, Tony really wants Bruce to come check out his lab facilities back at home because they're super cool, and he's like, "You're gonna love it. It's so fun. It's Candyland. You gotta come do research with me." Which is adorable. And then at one point he's testing out Bruce's control over the Hulk, and he pokes him in the side, and Steve gets very upset about it because he's really worried about Bruce hulking out, but Bruce seems just charmed by it, honestly.
Mark Ruffalo gives RDJ just the cutest look, like, oh, you.
Oh, you.
As part of that scene, they're all talking, and Tony's like, I'm not worried. He offers Bruce snacks, which is very nice. I think
Very
some blueberries.
Sweet. Really cute. They have a fairly intimate sharing scene about how they feel about their flaws, and Bruce is telling him that being the Hulk is like being an exposed nerve, and Tony starts sharing that, his thing in his chest keeps him from dying at all times, and they get very, honest with each other 30 minutes into having met.
Yeah, they just are vibing. They're very open. They're like cool. It's good vibes. Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side, we've got Tony and Steve, whose main dynamic is banter, tension, two, different points of view clashing.
Mm-hmm. Steve at this point is still very serious, still mostly responding to authority in a way that doesn't last for very long.
Well, I think the thing is, my reaction, because I haven't rewatched The Avengers or Age of Ultron, is Joss Whedon just writes Steve very differently than he's written in even the first Avengers, which is the same screenwriter who go on to write the rest of the Captain Americas and both Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Mm-hmm. So Joss Whedon's take on Steve is much more like, golly gee willikers. Marcus and McFeely would never have the joke about there's only one God man and he doesn't dress like this. So I find Steve a little out of character relative to those other movies through both of Joss Whedon's takes. Mm-hmm. And he is, I think, even more uptight in a silly way than he is written by Marcus and McFeely. So it does create this clear opposition between him and Tony in these two films.
So yeah, their dynamic is mostly Steve being like, we have bosses, we have a job to do, you're not taking this seriously enough. And then Tony just being like, why would I take anything seriously? I'm Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what he's like. He's like,
But then, yes, over the course of the episode, they have to fight together to, stay alive. And it builds trust and respect between the two of them, as you might expect. And so then, by the end of the movie, they've saved each other's lives. They share a handshake, and it's all good.
It's all good. And then they eat shawarma together at the end.
Right. Whereas Tony and Bruce have also bonded through the thing. Hulk saves Tony's life when Tony falls through the portal during the big battle. And at the end, the two of them get into the same car and leave together.
Yes.
So that's the little difference between them.
They drive off together into the sunset.
Into the sunset. Probably just towards a lab that they can both do science research in.
Which is fun.
We also should say, as a side note, that we both noticed and wrote down, so it has to be said, Mark Ruffalo is looking damn fine in this movie.
Ooh, he's hot as shit. It's aggressive. I love Steve. You know that about
You're
me.
You're a Steve girl, I know.
And I think, Chris Evans is very handsome in the role, but Chris Evans outside of Steve is fine to me. But every time I see Mark Ruffalo, I'm like, oof. Jeez,
I don't know what they were
Chill
doing.
Out.
He's wearing just tailored pants and a purple button down, but he's looking good.
His hair is just starting to pepper.
It's beautiful.
He looks great.
I don't know what's going on, but he looks fantastic.
Ruffalo's looking good.
It was worth noting.
Yeah, just shout out to Ruffalo. Love the man.
All right. So, what about Ultron?
Ultron, I didn't take a ton of notes here. I would say Steve and Tony are getting along like they did at the end of Avengers. There's this very silly running joke where at the beginning of Age of Ultron, someone swears and Cap goes, language or something, and they're like, oh, you're such a dweeb, Cap.
Yep.
That's the whole movie. I will say when Tony has his Wanda-induced hallucination, Cap is the one he talks to, and Cap is like, why didn't you save us, Tony?
Tony.
Yeah, but that's about their dynamic. Tony and Bruce are still getting along, being science bros. This will become relevant later, too, when we talk about the fix, but if you, listener, do not remember Age of Ultron super well, he, of course, makes Ultron, who is in, a robot body, and Ultron wants to have a non-robot body. And so he ends up starting to make the body that becomes Vision. And he gets interrupted partway through that. And so they are taking the cradle where he's making the body. The Avengers recover it. And at this point, a normal person would be like, Tony, stop trying to make a fucking AI robot.
Yeah, what are you doing, Tony?
Idea. You tried it. It made Ultron. Let's shut this down. But he says to Bruce, like, no, this is great. We'll just put Jarvis in the robot body and make a true AI robot. And at first Bruce is like, I'm in a time loop. This is crazy. But Tony talks him into it. He says to Bruce, we're mad scientists. We're monsters, buddy. We got to own it. Make a stand. And Bruce is like, I guess. And he goes along and starts making another stupid robot with Tony. But it works out because they make Vision, who's, he's cool. Great. He can lift Thor's hammer. He's worthy.
I mean, that's pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I like Vision. I don't have a problem with him, but
no.
Before they made Vision at the time,
on the heels of having done the worst thing ever, Steve was like, let's just do it again and it'll work this time. And honestly, it did. So
I guess he was right.
He was right.
In the end, it worked out.
What about this Tony Steve bit at the end?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes. And then at the end, Tony, retires, basically. He's like, I'm out. You can lead the new Avengers, Cap and Black Widow. And Steve does this to him. I will miss you, Tony.
Oh, yeah. That's nice.
It is nice.
Okay. So he doesn't get a lot of time to miss him because they're back at it in Civil War. We do not have Bruce in this.
I was going to say, does Civil War take place after Iron Man 3? Is that how Tony gets back in the saddle?
Probably, yeah. I can never remember the actual sequence of events, but that makes sense to me. So we have no Bruce in this one.
Oh yeah, Bruce disappeared at the end of Age of Ultron. He flew in a plane to space.
When you reminded me that Bruce is partially responsible for the events of Ultron, I was like, it kind of sucks that Tony's left here feeling guilty through Civil War and Bruce is just hanging out in space.
He's not really hanging out. He's now a gladiator in a weird aliens, gladiatorial contest.
It's true.
He's having a weird time.
So anyway, if people don't recall, the events of Civil War are the Avengers are in disagreement about whether or not they should sign the Sokovia Accords, which are an attempt to provide some sort of governmental regulation on superheroes. Meanwhile, Baron Zemo, whose life was destroyed by them during the events of Age of Ultron, is trying to tear apart the Avengers, specifically Tony and Steve, using Bucky as a lever.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a lot of Tony Steve back and forth because they're the representatives of the two main sides of the argument through the course of this movie.
Tony's like, we should sign. Steve's like, we shouldn't sign.
That's the heart of it, yeah. But then we throw in a little wrinkle later on of Steve knew that Bucky or that someone killed your parents. And it may or may not have been Bucky. Yeah.
It could have been Bucky.
So, we won't talk about all of the early stuff. There's a lot of back and forth between them about the disagreement, but the really emotional stuff happens towards the end of the movie when they've already gotten to Siberia. Tony has figured out that Steve was right about Zemo framing Bucky, etc., etc., so he comes to back them up in the fight against Zemo. He shows up in Siberia. Steve says, it's good to see you, Tony. Mm-hmm. And then Tony's whole world gets torn apart by some Zemo revelations.
Yeah, Zemo does show him the security footage. It's really unlucky that there was a security camera right there in the middle of the woods when Bucky killed his parents.
You'd think he could have crashed them somewhere where there weren't any cameras. Especially since it was what year was
91.
It? 91? It's not like the surveillance state was anywhere close to what it is now. Come on.
It's very unlucky, or for Baron Zemo, very lucky.
Yes.
Anyway. Anywho. He shows Tony the footage of Bucky killing Tony's parents, and as you said, Tony turns to Steve and he's like, Did you know? And he's like, no. And he's like, don't bullshit me, Rogers. And he's like, yeah, I kind of knew. And he's really upset. I mean, we kick off the film with him struggling to still deal with the death of his parents when he was a young man. So, it's a deep wound for Tony. And he's very upset that Steve tried to protect Bucky again, kind of. This has also been part of the ongoing feud between them, of Steve choosing Bucky over the Avengers.
Yeah, because the Avengers are supposed to be his family. They're Tony's new family. We also should say, right before this happens, Zemo does say, right before he's about to show the video to Steve, I lost everyone, and so will you, meaning he lost his family, and Steve will lose Tony and the family of the Avengers, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they fight. It's a fucking badass fight. It's one of the coolest fights they've ever done. It's an awesome fight scene between Tony and Steve and Bucky. But we finally get to a point where he just can't understand why Steve won't get on board, and Steve's trying to explain it to him, and he says to Tony, he's my friend, about why he won't let Tony kill him. And Tony says, so was I.
Oh, it hurts.
Oh!
It's sad. It hurts and it's sad.
It hurts and it's sad.
And then Steve wins the fight. He depowers Tony's suit. And he's walking away with Bucky. Bucky's lost his vibranium arm.
I mean, that is an emotional bit of that fight when his arm gets taken off. Oh.
Yeah. They're in shambles. And of course, then also Tony says, like, my dad made that shield.
Officially choosing Bucky over all things Avengers.
Yeah.
He would rather have Bucky than be Cap.
It's sad. It's a sad situation.
It's fraught.
But you know what, Tony? Bucky was we didn't mention the part. This is not relevant to the ship, but the part where Tony says to Bucky, do you even remember them? And Bucky says, I remember all of them. The poor boy.
The poor boy. My real problem, we'll get into this when we start talking about our opinions, but my real problem with all of this is it's Bucky's movie. I only care about what he's going through. I'm like, your petty disputes are nothing compared to the fact that this guy was brainwashed and forced to murder a bunch of people. He's the one going through it.
It's really sad. Come on, Tony. It's not his fault. What was he was brainwashed.
It's not his fault, but he doesn't care because he's really upset about his parents, you know? I get it.
You know, it's the flip side of the coin of How to Train Your Dragon, too.
Yes. Now that's an emotional movie.
Oh, man. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm so glad I did not see that movie as a child. I'm glad I was a full-grown adult when I saw that movie.
Although, as a full-grown adult, you really get the full weight of it. I mean, a lot of bad things happen in children's movies, and kids are just sort of like, okay, cool.
I don't know. I was scarred by a lot of kids' movies that I saw as a kid. I don't think I would have been able to handle that. But anywho.
Anyway.
At the very end of the film, Steve, because he's always the bigger man, he sensed...
and he's not... he gets that Tony is the hurt one, I guess, here. He's had to make the choice to leave, so he's like, I will extend an olive branch to Tony.
Yeah, and he writes Tony a letter, and he says, I know I hurt you, Tony. I guess I thought by not telling you about your parents I was sparing you, but I can see now that I was really sparing myself, and I'm sorry. Hopefully one day you can understand. And he has also left Tony a cell phone. An old cell phone at the time.
A flip phone.
Flip phone. He left him a flip phone. And he writes, no matter what, I promise you, if you need us, if you need me, I'll be there.
Aw, true pal.
He's great. And then he goes and he frees his other friends from the raft, and they all go on the run together.
Okay, so Science Bros and Stony, just in these few movies. We do want to do what we normally do and talk about if the actors and writers, directors, etc. are talking about these ships. Now, we don't have anything from the writers, directors, etc.
Oh, before we get into this, should we mention that, yes, we did not talk about Infinity War and Endgame, but we know that all three characters are also in those films. There's just not a lot of time for character stuff. It's like very plotty.
It's plot.
Yes, and we know there's still tension between Tony and Steve, but eventually they work it out to time travel to save the universe.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You get it. Okay, so let's talk about the actors, because we did actually find some cute stuff from the actors this time.
Yeah, because they're all cool dudes, I think.
As far as we know.
True.
No real idea.
As far as we know. We've got to stop saying that people are cool on the podcast because we keep getting shot in the foot.
It comes back to bite you every time.
Well, so we've got something from Ruffalo from, I don't know what year this quote is from, but maybe from 2013. He had an interview with Vulture where he's shown some fan art of the ship between him and Tony, and he's very excited about it.
He's psyched as all hell.
He goes, yes, it's me and Robert. Look at this. There's thousands of them. It's called the Science Bros. This is awesome. I've never heard of it. Why hasn't anyone told me about that? And they follow up with, is he now a Science Bros shipper? And he says, yeah, I love it. It's awesome. I endorse it 100%. You know what it is? It's open source creativity.
Yep.
And then he immediately is like, I'm going to call RDJ and tell him, and he's going to laugh his ass off. He'll love it. It's like, this is great. I got to tell everyone.
Very enthusiastic response.
Oh, Ruffalo.
Oh, Ruffalo. Love the man. As long as he's actually cool, which we don't really know.
We don't. But we hope.
We hope.
God, we hope.
We live in hope. Okay, so this is a little less enthusiastic, but Chris Evans was getting asked a lot of questions about the Tony and Steve relationship in between these, like, after Civil War happened. There was a lot of, are they ever going to reconcile? Are they going to be okay? What's going on with these two guys? And so we have a quote from him just about the importance of their relationship. So he says, just know that is a clearly important aspect in both of our storylines. In a lot of ways, Steve and Tony rely on each other. We're two sides of the same coin, fighting for the same thing, just with very different approaches. But neither one of us are complete. In a way, we need the other person. Reconciliation is necessary, but probably not easy to come by. They're incomplete without each other. That's nice.
It is nice. They are two sides to a coin.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, we have a quick Twitter post from RDJ where he reveals himself to be a multi-shipper. On Valentine's Day 2018, he posted an image supporting Steve/Tony, Bruce/Tony, and Pepper/Tony, and that image is just RDJ kissing Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo, and Gwyneth Paltrow on the cheek in different photographs. It's very cute.
I love that none of them are from the movies. It's literally just like him on red carpets with each of them.
Yeah.
He likes to kiss his friends.
Love it for him.
Absolutely love that.
And it's also cute because I think the only one where it looks like he's going up to kiss the person on the cheek is Gwyneth Paltrow.
She's tall.
Yeah. She's probably wearing heels on the red carpet, too.
She's certainly taller than him, yeah.
So that's adorable.
Real cute. Love it. All right. So do we want to get into some AO3 business?
I'd love to. So we've split up the fics between us. We did it on sort of word count, so we were both reading the same amount of words, but it also worked along gender lines.
We like to keep a gender binary as much as possible on this show.
You're doing the femme/ ones. I'm doing the Tony ones. So the first one is the Stony fic. Stony is number 9 on the all-time ships list, which is pretty cool.
Kind of a big deal.
Yep. There's about 38,000 total Stony fics, and we read the most kudos one, I think.
No, I mean, there are some longer ones we didn't read. I would say, I'll preface for all of these, I don't know if any of them honestly are the first fic to come up. There's a lot that have something longer in front of them. There are some that have, they're just like a minor ship in a ship that's, or a story that's really about some other ship. So we went to the first reasonably long and just about this couple fic for each of these things.
Okay. Thank you. So this Stony one is The Twice Told Tale by Aristea, I'm going to go ahead and say. And this was a pretty fun fic. So it starts at the time of Avengers with Tony meeting Steve, and their first meeting is kind of weird. And Steve really looks at him, and Tony's like, oh, he's thinking of my dad. And he's like, I don't love that. We learned that Tony has had a crush on Steve his entire life. He had like a photo of Steve from his dad's time that he's had a thing for. And so whenever he sees him, his heart kind of already flutters. And, you know, they're having some tension. There's the added tension, right, of like, oh, he's thinking about my dad. There's a mention of Uncle Greg, who is, you know, an invented character who Steve was like, what happened to him? I'm always, you know, thinking about him too. And he's like, Greg, like, just disappeared when he, like, died of alcoholism before I was born or something.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And so we're going along. They're getting along better and better. They're learning to work together. He's like, oh, I think we're actually becoming friends. There's a very cute moment where everyone has a space in the Avengers headquarters that they can like use. And he's like, I got to get Steve something. And he gives him the library, which is like straight Beauty and the Beast. And Steve really likes it. So they start spending evenings together in the library, just like hanging out. And on one of their missions, something goes wrong with Tony's armor. And he, like, crash lands back, I think, at the mansion. The rest of the Avengers, for some reason, have gone to headquarters, and Steve's the only one there. And Tony almost dies, and, like, Steve's like, oh, no. And he pulls Tony into his arms, and then they kiss, and then they have sex, and now they're together.
Oh.
And, you know, they're spending time together, they're enjoying themselves. And then on another mission, Tony touches an object. They had been finding some aliens, they thought, and it turns out they were time travelers. And so he's sent back in time to before Steve's creation. like the day before he's about to get the serum.
Okay.
And he lands in the lab that is his dad's, and he meets his dad, and he tells him, like, no, I'm Uncle Greg's son. I'm your nephew. Because he's like, I can't tell my dad I'm his son or whatever. He's Greg Jr. And, you know, everything happens the way it happens in the movie because Tony's like, I can't change history. That would have, like, a butterfly effect.
Sure.
And the wraparound is, right, like, he is the Greg that Steve had fallen in love with and had a relationship with. And Tony sticks around long enough for Steve to go into the ice. He has this really nice heart-to-heart with his dad where he tells his dad that he's, like, going to do great things and eventually they'll find Steve because Howard's heartbroken when they lose Steve, too. And, you know, he's going to be a fine dad and he's able to, like, connect with his dad sort of like he does in Endgame. And then he is able to make it back to the future because he's just thinking about, like, he told Steve they'd be together and for Steve to, like, lose another
that would
lover,
be rough,
right? Yeah. And he does make it back and it's, like, a little bit, you know, in the future from where he's had, but he's like, I knew you'd come back. And he says to Steve, like, when did you realize I was Greg? And he was like, he'd done this thing when they were together where he'd, like, put his thumbs in the hollows of his jaw and it really turns Tony on. He's like, when I did that, I was like,
it was quite clear.
It's very lovely. It's got some nice, like, growth for Tony. You know, you do the resolution of the relationship with his dad. There's the nice, like, twist around that he was Greg and that, you know, they're sort of fated to be together, too. It was cute. I liked it.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
That sounds adorable.
I liked it quite a bit.
I like that Greg plot twist.
I know.
We love a time travel plot twist.
I enjoy time travel, you know. Good times. Mm-hmm. I will say I enjoyed the Science Bros fic a little bit less, but I'll tell you about it.
Tell me why.
It's called Consequences. It's by Arctic Vulpix. And I will say, you know, people can write whatever they write. Yeah. We're not here to police anyone's fandom activity.
Of course not.
But I would be curious, and we can revisit this, I guess, too, in the future. If someone wants to send us a shorter fic that is really about the Science Bros and, like, their relationship, because this fic is really about how much these people hate Steve Rogers.
That's a rough read for you.
It's really tough. It's not for me. I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but I think overall, it's not for me.
Yeah.
There's a note at the top of the fic that says, many things in Ultron always bothered me, so I wanted to write something where Rogers and Maximoff don't get off scot-free for everything they do. Enjoy. Ooh. So those are the consequences.
Fighting words.
And so this fic takes place right at the time where Tony is working with Bruce to create another robot.
Yep.
And in the movie, Steve shows up with Wanda and Pietro and throws his shield at the machine to stop Tony and Bruce from doing this because he's like, guys,
we just did this.
We just did this. And Wanda and Pietro have turned away from helping Ultron because when he started to download his consciousness into the Vision body, Wanda could finally see into his mind and saw, like, oh, he wants to destroy all life on Earth.
Yeah,
actually, I'm not on board with that.
Yeah.
Right, and Wanda and Pietro's motivation is they're trying to get revenge on Tony Stark because Tony Stark almost killed them when they were children, and, you know, we learned more about that in WandaVision, which is obviously in the future from when this fic was written, which was 2012. Mm-hmm. But basically, this fic takes place in that moment. Banner gets very upset that Tony has, I think in the fic, Steve hits Tony with the shield. That doesn't happen in the movie.
Gotcha.
And he gets really hurt. And Bruce and the Hulk are very loyal to Tony, so Hulks out. And he kills Wanda and Pietro.
Holy shit!
Mangles Steve.
Goddamn!
And at the end of the story, Natasha and Clint and everyone else have shown up and been like, Steve, how could you hurt Tony like this? They put Tony into the cradle to heal his body. They've taken Vision's body out. And at the end of the story, Natasha realizes that she has not appreciated Tony enough. Tony has been referred to just as the genius throughout the story. So she's thinking about the man that was fighting for his life inside, of the man who she dismissed and put down for far too long before realizing just what a brilliant soul she'd missed under the masks. And Clint is like, what are you going to do? And she's like, we're Avengers, she whispered. We avenge. And she turned to plunge the shield into Steve's chest, betrayed anger and grief fueling her. So at the end, Natasha kills Steve.
Oh my God!
And in the comments of this fic, people are like, I hope Steve gets more comeuppance. And I think the author is like, he's dead.
More than dying?
More than being killed. They want him to survive so he can be punished more. For what? I don't know.
Unclear. All right, well, you've stumbled upon the Steve haters.
Yeah, one person in the comment referred to Steve as private, dumb as a box of hammers. Yeah, one person wrote, damn, I was not expecting Romanoff to put the shield into Steve's chest. I hope the bastard survives, though. Death would allow him to avoid more consequences. And it's like, for what?
I don't know.
So it's kind of like angry over there in a way that, again, you know, I'm admitting I am a Steve lover,
Yes.
but I feel like even if I was more moderate on Steve, I don't hate any of the Marvel characters in a way where I hope they kill each other. So I'm like, it's a little angry in this space in a way that I'm like, not for me.
And that's such a bummer because what I like about the Science Bros ship is like they're so happy and fun. I just want to see them like being cute together.
Yeah, that was the other disappointment. It's like, I'd love to just read a fic about them, like, doing science together, solving problems, going on vacay. I don't know, whatever. I like their connection, and this isn't really about their connection.
Yeah.
It's about hating Steve. So it sucks, too, to, like, still centralize Steve in a story that, like, Steve doesn't need to be in at all.
Yeah, it's like, if you're not into Steve, just don't have Steve be there, man.
Yeah, so if someone has, like, another shortish fic that they're like, this really exemplifies a good Science Bros fic that is not about hating Steve.
Send it our way, because we need a palate cleanser now.
Yeah. So, yeah, we mentioned before, too, this is hopping back to the Stony fic. I think we had a conversation when we were outlining where, again, showing our biases, watching, like, Civil War, it's hard to walk away with being like, Steve and Tony, I don't know. Steve and Bucky. It's Steve and Bucky.
It's all Steve and Bucky all the time to me, but...
Yeah, so we're like, how does this ship come to be? And what we read, right, is the Tony-Steve ship really predates the MCU. And a lot of the tropes that you will see in the MCU fics are being pulled from the existing Tony-Steve trope. So a couple of them that we found this post by Copper Badge on Tumblr. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they mention is, like, Tony worshipping Steve since he was a kid, and that pops up in the Twice Told Tale.
Which doesn't really seem like the vibe of them in the MCU.
Right.
Tony's more like, my dad was always talking about you, and it annoyed the hell out of me.
Yes, yeah. So there's a couple of tropes in the Twice Told Tale that seem to be pulling from those previous Steve and Tony tropes, and when we read that, we were like, oh yeah, no, that makes 100%.
Absolutely. And then we saw little clips from the comics, and it seems like there's lots of shippable stuff happening in the comics, so...
Yeah.
Get into it if you're into comics.
100%. And again, like, we're not here to police anyone's fandom activity. So even if you watch Civil War and you're like, I'm still shipping Steve and Tony, good for you. Have fun.
I will say, also, we saw that one of the main, at least nowadays, tropes in the Tony Steve fic are fix-its for Civil War, which I understand. Because once that happened, you were like, we gotta work this out somehow. Yeah.
This is not taking me down the path to Steve and Tony ending up the way I'd hoped. But yeah, so send us a different Science Bros fic that is about them being bros and getting along, and don't even have Steve being a character.
Gimme. All I want is Bruce and Tony just being cool and funny.
Yeah.
Come on.
Hanging out.
They're so cute together.
I like it. I like it. And then Steve and Bucky can be together because Tony and Bruce are together, and everyone's happy.
And everyone's happy. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there are sort of, not to get into any sort of like, there are two camps or whatever, but there certainly are people in fandom that tend more towards like angst and everyone fighting and we can't get along, and some people that tend more towards like, why don't we just ship everybody with everybody and they can all have a good time.
True.
So, or at the very least, like, let's pair off them and them and them and them, and then everyone is just together and happy. And I feel like my instinct there is like, let's just put Bruce and Tony together and Steve and Bucky together, and like, let's just find all the people. Why not?
Good.
Why not, good, guys? We're all happy then. We don't have to fight. So yeah, ship wars. It sounds like the ship wars between Stony and Stucky got a little vicious for a while.
Yeah, always unfortunate.
Yeah,
you hate to see it. It seems like it was one of those things that ran some people out of fandom, and you're like, oh, come on, guys. Let's just have fun.
Fandom should be fun. Why are we personally attacking people on the internet? It's unnecessary. Just because you want to see two fictional characters get together? Like,
just read those fics then.
This is exactly.
Not for us. We don't quite get that. But yes, there have been ship wars. clearly there's some hard feelings about certain characters in some spaces of the fandom in a way where I'm just like,
where is this coming from?
I don't know that there's any fictional character I hate as much who's not like explicitly a villain.
But I mean, they're fictional characters. Like, even with villains, I don't write fanfic, so I don't know that. But like, I don't know if even if I did, if I would be compelled to spend my time writing a fic punishing a character that I didn't like. Like, it just feels like this very negative spiral headspace to get into, where it's like, how is this pleasing you? I don't know, but whatever.
And what are the consequences for? What did Steve do?
That I don't know. They didn't make clear what Steve did that he deserves consequences for.
I think it's just that Steve disagrees with Tony and they feel he's in the wrong every time, where I'm like, that's wild.
Yeah. Well, even if that's the case, I don't understand wanting to kill him, though. Like, it's just because you think he has the wrong opinion a lot. Like, I don't know.
Not for me. That fic wasn't for me. That's what I can say with certainty.
On a one-sentence description of it, I could have told you it wasn't for you. It's quite clear.
Yeah. But, it's all good. Guys, it's all good. Okay, so we're going to run through our questions as we go through each ship. And I know we're doing 2, but, there are Tony ships. So, either one. Either Science Bros or Tony Steve. Is it queer baiting, queer coding, or queer canon?
I don't know that I would say either of these are queer baiting or queer canon. I mean, Tony does have sort of like chaos bisexual vibes. He flirts with everyone, so there might be an element of queer coding to him, but I don't know that, these relationships are specifically like the writers saying, don't you want these two to be together? I don't know about that.
No, I agree. I don't think it's queer baiting. It's certainly not queer canon. So again, like Avengers Age of Ultron is like Joss Whedon written, directed, and we know in Age of Ultron he sticks Natasha with Bruce, so
no homo lady.
No homo lady Natasha, which is sad because she's like an actual character.
She's a real character. Why does she have to be a no homo lady?
And those scenes are so uncomfortable between them. It's not pleasant.
Nope.
Yeah, I think it's nothing.
Yeah. If you gender swapped in either case, would they be together?
Sure.
I mean, if you gender swap someone in Steve and Bruce.
No,
sorry, not Steve and Bruce. Tony and Bruce. Then maybe. I feel like it just sort of becomes like almost a Tony and Pepper situation where they're just like coworkers who have chemistry. Yeah. And you're like, sure, great, get together.
Yeah.
Tony and Steve, I would say what we're given in the MCU movies, not speaking to the comic books, is not enough to build a relationship on with those two.
I like to believe that Steve, if Tony were a girl, would have the same bro-y relationship that he has with Natasha, which is one of my favorite things in the movies, is how much they're bros.
Yeah.
I think Steve is, canonically, not talking about shipping, he's so still in love with Peggy, he, cannot move on. And, secondary to that, once Bucky comes back, it's it's over.
Bucky is his guy. Who else could even steal his attention away?
Yeah, it's over for anyone who's not Bucky at that point.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah, but maybe Tony Bruce, if you swapped one of them, they could date.
If we just brought Bruce more in, I'd be open to a Tony Bruce Pepper situation.
Sure. And who wouldn't want to bring Mark Ruffalo into your relationship?
You think Pepper's saying no?
Come on, we saw him. We saw him, guys.
All right, so why isn't it canon?
Well, it's 2012. We're way before the MCU gets gay. The first queer character it's ever had 15 times or whatever.
Yep.
And I don't... there's no real, romantic relationships in the Avengers.
You mean, between Avengers? Oh, no, you mean in the movie The Avengers.
Yes. In the film The Avengers, they're, Pepper is off screen. Mm-hmm. They specifically tell Thor, Natalie Portman's fine, don't worry about it.
She's good,
everyone's
don't you
worry. Love interest is not in the film.
Yeah.
No time. Only war with Loki. And then obviously in Age of Ultron, you have the Natasha Bruce thing, which I don't want that. I don't need that. We meet Hawkeye's wife too.
No one asked for that. They just keep passing Natasha around between Avengers to try to get her to have a relationship with them. And it's why are we doing this?
Yeah. luckily, eventually, again, once I think Marcus and McFeely take over, they stop. Marcus and McFeely are like, just let her be part of the team. And we're like, thanks, guys. I love it. That's great.
Yeah.
I support it entirely. So, I think there just wasn't a lot of attention to there being romantic relationships in these stories. And even the one time Joss Whedon tried, it was like, don't do that.
We would advise you to not write romantic relationships. Okay, yeah, concur. And then do we even need a queer baiting scale? Because we said it's not queer baiting.
No.
Okay.
But once again, send me a Science Bros fic. That's
please
fun.
do, honestly. We would love to read that. That's Tony and Steve and Tony and Bruce. Who do we have next?
We got Peggy and Natasha. Now, this was something that got requested, and what we read is there's basically the couple of What If episodes. So, What If is, of course, a Disney Plus series where they explore alternate realities, different things that could have happened.
What if?
What if? And so, within like the sort of, it seems like throughout the What Ifs, there's a Captain Carter, who is Peggy, who got the super soldier serum instead of Steve. And she shows up multiple times across What Ifs.
Yes.
But we'll start with, what if the Watcher broke his oath? Mm-hmm. What happens there?
So in this one, Natasha and Peggy both know each other already. They're like doing little missions together.
It basically starts with the beginning of Captain America the Winter Soldier, but Peggy is Steve.
Right. So the two of them are like chummy. The beginning of the episode is Natasha keeps trying to suggest guys for Peggy to date for some reason. And Peggy gives her a little flirty, just when we were becoming pals, widow, and she winks at her as she leaves. And so that's sort of the setup of that dynamic. And then what happens in the episode is Peggy gets pulled away by the Watcher into an alternate universe to fight with a bunch of other alternate universe versions of characters, and
to stop Ultron, who has the Infinity Stones.
Yes, in this universe, Ultron has all the Infinity Stones, so he's basically Thanosing out. So she meets an alternate universe version of Natasha, and she instinctively trusts her because of her version of Natasha, but Natasha doesn't know her, so she needs to prove to her that she's trustworthy. And she tells Natasha, this alternate Natasha, we're from another universe. We're here to stop Ultron. I can prove it. Your father is Yvonne. Your dad's Alexei. And you're the one woman I trust to have my 6, including now. And there are 3 people you trust in the universe, and I count myself lucky enough to be one of them. And Natasha says, well, we must be close. And Peggy says, I believe the term is BFF. And so then, because of this speech, Natasha is sort of won over. They do all of their fighting. They win their thing. At the end, Peggy is thinking about going back in time. She's looking at an old picture of Steve and thinking like, I could go back to be with him. Haven't I earned my happy ending? And the Watcher tells her, your universe needs you. And she looks at this new Natasha, and they nod at each other and smile, and it's enough to convince Peggy to go back to her Natasha. Mm-hmm. So that's if the Watcher broke his oath. And then what happens? Ooh. What happens in What If Captain Carter fought the Hydra Stomper?
So also in the episode where she becomes Captain Carter, what happens to Steve is they basically make like an Iron Man suit for him so he can help them out. But he, instead of Bucky, seemingly dies in the train accident that happens in the first Avengers. And so she is mourning him, but he essentially becomes the Winter Soldier. Like he is they find him in the future in the suit.
Mm-hmm. Brainwashed.
Now, early on in this episode, What If Captain Carter fought the Hydra Stomper? We see her still working very closely with her Natasha. There's a cute moment where Peggy says to Nat, hey, lovely, need a lift? But, throughout the episode, Peggy's like, oh my God, Steve is back. We have to get Steve. I got to save Steve. Bucky is alive. He's like older now. He just had a normal-ish life.
Yep.
He's basically Bucky is filling the role of Peggy. Peggy is Steve, and Steve is like if Peggy and Bucky were combined into a person.
They've shuffled
Peggy.
Everyone around.
Yes. And so she's reconnecting with Steve. They go to find the Red Room, which is where Natasha was trained. Mm-hmm. And they think Steve isn't brainwashed, but then he turns out to be brainwashed. And in the end, he goes and sacrifices himself. And Peggy's like, no, Steve.
Yep.
But basically throughout the episode, anytime Peggy starts talking about Steve or like looking at Steve, Natasha is animated to look like she's feeling some kind of way about it.
Yeah.
She's like,
my
"Aw, man."
my note about this is hard to read the emotions on a cartoon's face, but interesting lingering shot on Nat as Peggy caresses Steve's face. So they're trying to do something.
They're trying to do something. Could be a little bit of jealousy.
And there's a lot of Nat, like, third wheeling when Peggy and Natasha are, you know, there's a time where it turns out he's like, not actually good, but there's a time where you're like, maybe they're getting back together, and they're, like, staring into each other's eyes and stuff, and Natasha's just, like, there.
Yeah.
Like,
And she's like, I'll go check out what's over there, guys. So, yeah.
yeah. So
There's some stuff there. There's a lot of looks.
There's a lot of looks, especially for a cartoon. They're doing their best with lingering glances.
I will say, like all Captain America stuff, Steve looms large over everything with Peggy. So
It's a
you're
lot
not really
about
getting away
Steve.
from that.
She spends a lot of time just, like, thinking and talking about Steve.
Anytime she sees a picture of Steve, she really looks at it.
Yep. So I don't know. There's something there, but it's thin.
But maybe Fick can round it out. Tell me about the Peggy, Natasha,
Well, maybe
Fick you read.
Fick can round it out, but what I have read for my most kudos is a little microfic. It's like just longer than 1,000 words, so it's a scene more than a fic.
Okay.
But it takes place after the first episode where Nat is trying to suggest a bunch of people for Peggy to go out with. Because and you're getting the sense that Natasha is sort of deflecting from her own feelings for Peggy, and that's why she keeps doing this. And so then Peggy can't understand why Natasha keeps, like, why are you bothering me with all of these people? And then over the course of this conversation, she realizes that maybe Natasha is kind of interesting. So Natasha's listening to all these people, and then Peggy's like, what about Natasha from Ops? And she thinks Natasha's going to reject her, but Natasha's like, I am on board. And so they just, like, make a date, and they're going to see each other, and that's the whole fic.
Okay.
But I mean, it was cute. It was a cute little
I don't think you
scene.
said the name of the Fick or the Fick stats.
Apology. The fic is The Date Debrief by Agents Carter, but with an X instead of an A. And this is a tiny little ship. There are only about 250 Peggy, Natasha tagged fics on AO3. Little baby.
Well, it sounds like a very cute Fick.
It was lovely. It was really sweet. I do feel like for a couple that has so little going on screen, there's got to be someone somewhere who's written the, like, 20,000 word, here's how we develop their relationship version of this fic, but this was a cute little moment. Okay, creators. We like to talk about creators interacting with fans, stuff they say about the ship. We have found a poorly sourced, potentially not real quote that we will read to you anyway, because I don't think, even if it's not real, it's not going to change anyone's mind about anything.
It's not going to break this whole thing wide open.
No. But on one of the fandom, websites talking about this ship, they had a quote from Haley Atwell where she says, they respect each other, they admire each other, but they also share an understanding of what it's like to be a woman in this type of situation. It also has the kind of natural friendship built on chemistry between two female characters who are so badass in their own way. Even if she didn't say it, it's true. They're both badass women who happen to be superheroes, so they've got that going for them.
It's true. That's a clear connection.
But yeah, certainly no, like...
They're in love and they're going to get
they're
together.
gonna
Let's
get together.
go, lesbians. Let's go.
Why doesn't anyone ever just straight up say, let's go, lesbians, let's go?
Only Billy Eichner.
They might say that for a future
Oh,
ship,
sure.
by the way.
To date, only Billy Eichner.
Only Billy Eichner.
Okay.
So, is it queer baiting, queer coding, or queer canon?
Well, it is interesting to animate a show and include lingering looks. I mean, that's intentional. You don't animate something accidentally.
That's even more intentional than when you're watching a live action movie, because the actor could be doing whatever, the editor could be doing whatever, but they had to actually draw these frames.
Yeah, so maybe a little queer coding. I don't know. I don't really know what they're trying to accomplish with these lingering looks.
No, it's unclear, but it does leave the tiniest sliver of room for you to be like, they were trying to accomplish something. I don't know what. That said, it's heavy on the I'm in love with Steve. Steve is the only man for me vibe. So maybe Natasha is just in unrequited love with Peggy.
Could be. We also do get a moment in the cartoon, as you pointed out, where Bucky almost also breaks through to Steve.
Bucky almost uses the power of gay love to pierce through the veil of brainwashing. And I think it would have worked if Peggy hadn't interrupted them. There's a time where Steve is, he's attacking all of them, and they're going to shoot him with a plane through a window, and Bucky stands in between him and the plane, and he's like, no, I've got this. And he says to him, like, Steve, it's me, Bucky. And Steve lowers his gun, and then he starts to raise it again, but we don't see what happens because Peggy just, like, tackles him.
Socks him.
Yeah.
You can't get away from these three. Just triangulating each other.
They're soul bonded,
Yeah.
Okay.
So why isn't it canon? I don't really know what they're trying to accomplish with the what-ifs.
We didn't gender swap.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. You can't gender swap Captain Carter because she's already gender swapped. So I guess Black Widow has to be a man? I don't know.
No, she's in love with Steve.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Nothing changes about the Steve thing. So, probably not. Why isn't it canon?
Again, I'm not really sure what they're trying to accomplish with these what-ifs. All the what-ifs could have just been gay ships. Wouldn't that have been a show?
Yeah, they really should have leaned into that opportunity. They're like, everyone's always saying our show's not gay enough. Let's just animate a bunch of episodes about how they were actually gay. What if?
What if? I mean, what if? Like, we're just saying what if.
Yeah, we're not even saying it's canon, guys. We're just saying what if.
Yeah. What if Steve and Bucky got together? What if Tony and Bruce got together? What if?
I mean, the fact that they haven't taken the opportunity to have Steve and Bucky get together in a what if means they truly don't care about us or our feelings.
It's true. Hurtful.
Okay, so we think it's not queer baiting, so no need for a scale. Let us move into what is, I will spoil it for you, queer canon, right off the top.
Mm-hmm. True.
Tell me about Agatha all along.
Well, we should say before we're going to be talking about Agatha and Rio, but it's not the only queer canon gay relationship I said queer canon gay relationship.
Queer canon gay relationship. It's all of that.
A little redundant.
It's a little.
In the show, you also have Teen, a.k.a. William, a.k.a. Billy.
Those are the same name, by the way. I think it's a little confusing that he is William as in one life and Billy as the other life.
Two completely different people. But maybe that's why he went into William's body, because he was like, it's basically the same.
Another person with my name.
Yeah. We don't know the rules of putting your souls into a body. Maybe they have to have the same name.
Maybe, yeah. Souls that have the same name are closer to each other.
Could be. So he has a boyfriend. We see him with his boyfriend. He kisses his boyfriend at one point. It's nice.
Lovely, supportive teenage relationship.
I liked it. Okay, but we are going to be talking about Agatha and Rio. So Agatha, we met in WandaVision. Mm-hmm. And she was pulling some strings. She's a bad guy.
It was Agatha all along.
It was Agatha all along. So at the end of WandaVision, Wanda has trapped Agatha into this fantasy world of Westview again. And when we come into Agatha all along, she's living out life in like a
gritty detective drama.
Yeah, it's like True Detective, Mayor of Easttown, like dark, slow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gray,
So she's working this case, and then Rio shows up as someone from the feds who's going to join in on her case. And
he's going to take her case.
So Agatha is really committed to this detective thing, and Rio is basically just there to, like, flirt at her and be like, why are you doing this whole detective thing? What's going on here? So it's just a lot of banter. I mean, she shows up. She's like, are you going to take control of my investigation? And Rio says, no, you could be in control if you want to be. It's just... it's a lot of that the whole first episode. You're vulnerable, only physically.
Admit it. You prefer me.
Horizontal in a grave. Yeah, this is all. They have a big fight at the end. This is the banter in the fight. I could just sit back and watch. You love it. The anticipation. Rio's threatening to kill Agatha, and Agatha is saying to her, wouldn't you prefer to kill me if I had my powers? Because that's the main issue, is Agatha doesn't have her powers. And Rio says, after all these years, Agatha Harkness will meet her end. It really warms the heart.
And Agatha says, you don't have a heart.
And Rio says, yes, I do. It's black and it beats for you. And then she licks Agatha's palm. So that's the first episode. You're like,
which has been cut. She has a cut on her palm. She doesn't just like lick her palm.
Something's going on with these two.
Indeed.
What could it be?
And so the plot of the show is Teen, a.k.a. William, a.k.a. Billy, has shown up to break Agatha out of Wanda's curse, and he wants to go on the Witch's Road, which promises the power at the end. If you make it to the end of the Witch's Road, you get whatever you want, but they got to form a coven, which they do. Although their coven includes a woman who is not a witch, which seems... which is the question
I love
that
you can just bring a random woman along who's not even a witch.
Not a witch. Which does get explained at the end how that happened, but no one questions it at the time.
Well, Agatha said she was a witch. So they're all like, I guess
true.
she's just a really weird witch. I don't know.
Yes. But she does die.
She sure does. She's the first one to go.
And so they need to get a new green witch. And so they do a summoning spell to bring a new green witch. And turns out it's Rio.
Wouldn't you know? So Rio shows up and Agatha is not pleased because she already didn't want to invite her to be part of the coven for, unnamed reasons. But Rio is delighted to be there. She comes, she arrives, she picks up a flower, she gives it to Agatha and says, "Milady." Agatha is like, you have to go. But she won't go. She's along for the ride now. So Rio's just sort of feeling out what's going on with this coven. She's like, why are you here? Why do you have these women in your coven? What's your deal these days, Agatha? And over the course of this, they decide, like, well, let's just work together while we're on the road, and we can deal with our shit afterwards. So they say, what if the road is like Switzerland? What if we just call a truce? Just, I don't know, one more big adventure. You and me.
Like old times?
Work and play. It could be nice, right? So they're just going to coexist. But clearly there's something lingering under the surface of the two of them that has gone wrong in their past, and we get a little hint into what that is when all of the witches are around a campfire sharing stories of how they got scars that they have. They're like, look at my elbow, look at the da-da-da.
Very Jaws.
Extremely Jaws. And Rio says, I've got a scar.
And Agatha says, no, you don't.
Rio says, a long time ago, I loved someone, and I had to do something that I did not want to do, even though it was my job, and it hurt them. She is my scar. And she looks at Agatha, and it's quite clear that that's who she's talking about. And Agatha gets up and walks away from the campfire, and Rio follows her, and they have this intimate moment where Rio is sort of like touching her back and her hair, and then they're almost gonna kiss, and Rio, stupidly, as they're about to kiss, breaks them up and says to Agatha, that boy isn't yours, which there's been a lot of question all along who Teen is and if it could be Agatha's dead son, and etc., etc. And Rio's like, nope.
So, yep, that's episode 4. A bunch of stuff happens. In episode 7, we just have a couple of fun little quotes.
Yeah. Teen is questioning Agatha about a bunch of stuff that's going on, and Agatha says, you want straight answers? Ask a straight lady. Which
is a fun thing to say to people.
Great quote. And then stuff's coming out. People are learning information. They all find out that Rio is not just some witch. She is death. And so they're like, wow, that really changes things. How does one get into a relationship with death? And Agatha says, what can I say? I like the bad boys. So it all starts to come out in episode 8. A lot of shit goes down plot-wise. They're getting to the end of the road. People have been lost along the way. They have to complete the final trial. But before that happens, Rio really wants the soul of Teen / William / Billy.
Because he was supposed to die.
Because he was supposed to die, and her job is to reap the souls that die. And so she makes this deal with Agatha that if Agatha will deliver her Teen, then she will... Agatha wants her to never talk to her again. Even when she dies eventually, she wants Rio, death, to not talk to her ever. And you're like, wow. This is really, really hard feelings here. But she agrees to the deal. She finishes the trial, but she does not deliver the boy because he has already escaped. And Rio is waiting for her to finish. She says, welcome, my love, when she gets out. Agatha doesn't take kindly to going along with Rio, so she starts to try to do a spell to get rid of her. The spell is to, expel evil. And Rio says, you're calling me evil? I'm the natural order of all things, baby, and you love me. And she blows her a kiss. Then there's fighting between the two of them. During this, Rio asks her, "Why don't you want me?" Which is, like, very vulnerable to say during a physical fight. Billy shows up to save Agatha. She gets her powers back from him. Rio says to Agatha, "Power looks good on you."
Oh, and Agatha says, "Honey, everything looks good on me." Which, to be fair, we've seen Catherine Hahn in a lot of episodes in this show. Everything does look
good on her. She's hot stuff. I think she and Rio are both hot as hell through the whole thing. So then she's like, "All right, now that Billy's here, I'm going to take Billy." And Agatha's like, "Cool, go to it." Billy is like, "Wait, is this how your son died? Did you give him up for yourself?" And so then Agatha changes her mind, decides to save Billy. She kisses Rio and agrees to die. It's sort of the kiss of death situation. She dies. And Rio, like, you know, turns her grave into a bunch of flowers and stuff. And so you're like, well, she's gone. Bummer. End of Agatha, I guess.
Yep, that is a bummer. And then in episode 9, we find out what happens to her, but we also get some more of her backstory. So we start in, what is it, like the 1750s?
1750.
Oh, it's right in 1750. Look at us writing it in the notes.
It was on the screen, so I wrote it down.
Yes, and Agatha is quite pregnant, and she's in the woods by herself. And she's crying.
She's going into labor.
She's going into labor, and then she sees Rio, and she's like, "It cannot be."
And Rio says, "It must be.
If you do this, I will hate you forever. My love, please save my baby."
"I can offer only time."
"How much time?" And Rio doesn't answer.
She gets the hell out of there. And then,
but obviously the implication is, like, the baby was supposed to be stillborn. It is born, not stillborn.
Yep.
And she has a little boy. For about, 6 years?
6 years. And then, time to go. Rio does have to come
shows up.
reap him.
Takes the little boy.
But she does it really nicely.
She does.
It's a very sweet reaping. As nicely as you can take a 6-year-old into the afterlife.
Yep. And but Agatha does wake up, and she's like, "I wanted more time." It's very sad.
It's rough. I mean, you sort of, all along, you're like, these two clearly were in a relationship. Clearly something horrible happened between them. What could it have been? And then you get to this, and you're like, yeah, that would do it. Like, the death of a child tends to break up marriages. Like, this is just a statistic. But if one of the parents had to reap the soul of the child, like, that's hard to come back from.
It is. It's pretty tough. It's fairly tough.
That's a rough situation for the two of them.
So yes, we do learn that. It explains her backstory. Agatha's not, well, she's dead, but she's a ghost.
She's a ghost.
A ghost. There's some implication that she doesn't want to, like, fully exit this plane, so she doesn't have to confront her son or maybe Rio.
Yeah.
TBD.
TBD. But maybe there'll be more Agatha all along, and we'll get some more story there.
Yeah, I think Agatha Harkness is a ghost in a lot of the comics, and she helps Wanda and the kids, like, I don't know, with whatever they're doing.
Fun. Okay, so that is the text of Agatha all along. We have all kinds of actors and creators saying all kinds of things about this show because a lot of the lead up to it was a thing that has happened a lot in Marvel, but usually doesn't get delivered
Disney
upon.
Across the board.
Yes, where in the lead up they were like, we're hearing the show's going to be really gay. We're hearing it might be the gayest Marvel thing ever. And so a lot of the actors are getting asked about this in the lead up. How gay is it? So
how gay is it?
Exactly. And they all wanted to answer that question. So we'll just run through all of the actors. I assume this was all like at some red carpet or something because they seem to have all been asked the same question. So they ask Aubrey Plaza, is it the gayest Marvel show? And Aubrey says, it better be because that's what I signed up for. It will be a gay explosion by the end of it. She delivered, honestly. It was a gay explosion.
They ask Ali An, who played one of the witches in the Coven. I do not remember.
I think she plays the daughter of the, musician.
I'm pretty sure that's true, but what was that character's name?
I couldn't possibly tell you. I'm supposed to remember names for all these characters?
She said that Agatha All Along is the gayest show on Marvel. She also mentions there is a lot of pageantry we're already competing with. I think the thing that makes it more gay is that we're singing with Patti LuPone.
Accurate. We also have Sashir Zamata, who was asked the same thing, and she said, I would agree with that. You'll see when you watch. Witches are queer inherently just because we're outcasts and set aside for many reasons. This show shows a really good representation of different types of people and that we can all use the power we have within to go forward and be great. Oh, inspirational with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They asked Joe Locke, who plays teen/Billy/William. And he says, it's got many layers, and gay is one of them. That's one of the great things about the show. Teen is a queer guy on the show, but it's not the driving force, which I think is really great. It's really nice to just have these positive queer characters.
Absolutely. Murdering people and doing magic.
I was going to say, are they positive? I think Agatha is definitely evil.
The point of it, though, is that their relationships have nothing to do with whether they're good or evil. They just are things about them that happen to be.
Yes.
I do agree with Sashir, though, that witches are inherently queer.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into that a little bit more, too, as we go along.
Okay, so then we have Catherine Hahn, Agatha herself, who had a couple of things to say about the queerness of the show. She said, I'm very proud of this show and the normalizing of queerness and women of different ages and different races. It's very diverse, and I'm proud of that. That it is a woman and queer-led show feels very appropriate. Also, I know that there are always going to be people who are stuck. My wish for them is that the more they see of these shows that are as rad and exciting and fierce as shows that they think are the only kind that can be, they will start to loosen that kind of thinking. Okay.
True.
Yeah, representation matters.
She says in a separate interview, I'm so proud of the show. This is what a large portion of the fans want to see and have looked to be represented in these huge movies. They're a huge part of these movies in this genre's audience, so it just makes sense. And also, it makes it that more rich.
So true. Mm-hmm. So, that's all the actors who were very happy to be part of such a queer show. And then we have Jack Schaefer, who is the creator of the show, who had lots to say about the queerness of the show, the relationship between Agatha and Rio, etc. So let's get into her quotes. For more on witches, she said, in our research into the history of witches, contemporary witches in pop culture, there's a very strong intersection between the LGBTQ community and witchcraft that was undeniable and needed a place in the show. I love that. I said to you when we read it first, like, imagining a scenario where Disney didn't want this to be a queer show, and she was like, but the research, and they were like, okay.
It's just factually true. Witches are gay. So we can't make a witch show.
If they're not gay, it doesn't make any sense. No one would buy it.
So.
Fair.
You decided to have witches.
It's the only thing to do. Yeah, you're the ones who picked witches. I'm just telling you, witches are gay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is more about Agatha and Rio's relationship.
She's asked, did you have more of the backstories worked out of what of Rio's relationship with Agatha was like? And Jack Schaefer says, we did. We talked a lot about their meet cute. We had these really pretty visuals of Agatha killing people and then seeing Rio across the bodies, like that line, they met over corpses. I mean, I saw it in my mind. It was really beautiful and also quite funny. And then the room took it in a direction that then they lived together in a cottage, and we talked at length about it, to the point of, is Rio Nikki's father? We went down those paths, and they were very gratifying to explore. I think there's more story there, but we were already biting off so much with the Nikki sequence that was vital to this story, that it didn't feel like we could flash all the way back to Rio and Agatha before Nikki, and then get into Nikki. It sort of threatened to tip the boat over, but I think all those discussions inform what you do see of their relationship.
Yeah. It would have been hard because there's only one episode where we see the backstory, so it would have become like very long and drawn out. But it's nice to hear that the room was asking all the same questions that I think fans ask when they watch stuff like this, and so they had this thought out idea of what their relationship was, and that's what they drew from when they wrote the show. So it's nice to know writers are thinking about characters. Sometimes they ask them questions and you're like, do you even know this character that you wrote? But not in this case. Another question about Rio and Agatha's relationship, it came in the context of her talking a lot about Rio, just like what it means to have a like physical manifestation of death. How do you write that as a character? But then more specifically, she says how she is with Agatha is a totally different story because that is their love affair. And so with Agatha, she's toxic and petty and vulnerable, and she doesn't have the upper hand, which was our favorite thing. We were like, if Agatha's going to be in a relationship with death, Agatha would have the upper hand. How hot is that for our main girl, right? Our protagonist has death whipped. We were just like totally gaga over that idea.
It's a great idea.
Yep.
It's a great idea. And I think continuing on along those same lines of them thinking through the backstory of these characters, she also says, "We did a lot of work in the writer's room to build the history of these two women. What ended up on the page wasn't all of that. It was where they are now. And there were times where we were like, is it enough? Is it clear? Because in our minds, they were married in some witchy way. And we were like, we need to make that apparent." And I think they did.
I think they did too, but this leads me into the fact that there is a lot of discussion around this show that it is not, like, there wasn't enough Agatha-Rio relationship development. So I think this falls into a number of categories. There's, on the one hand, people who are like, I just would have liked to see more of them, which I think is fair because there are several episodes where Rio's just not in it, and, like, they're delightful to watch on screen together, so I would have liked more of them. But then there are people who are like, it's not overt enough. We don't get enough development in their relationship. We saw one person saying they felt like the relationship between Teen and his boyfriend was more well developed than the relationship between Agatha and Rio, which I just don't personally agree with. I think
the thing is the relationship between Teen and his boyfriend is less complex.
Yes. Exactly. There's a difference between it's like a 2-note relationship and we get both notes, and this is clearly like a very complicated relationship that we're just seeing glimpses of. But I think the work they did in the writer's room to think about the backstory of their relationship comes through, because there's all sorts of stuff that happens where you're like, what's the deal with that? And then like 2 episodes later, you're like, oh, here's what's going on with the two of them. It's clearly very complex, and we're left with questions, certainly, but that's what you want.
Is Rio Nikki's father?
Is Rio's Nikki's father? That's the main question. And I have a fic that will answer it. Ooh. But yeah, I appreciate the writers going into this with the intentionality of like, we want to deliver a very specific message to the audience. Here's how we want you to come away from the show feeling. I think it worked for us. Maybe it didn't work for everyone. But if it is for them being like, we want you to know how important they were to each other. They were married. They broke up for some sort of like horrible reason. We answer what the reason is. And so you're left with like, it's a very complex and tragic relationship, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't please everybody. They tried. They tried their best with the story.
There's a lot going on in the show, too. You got all the arcs for all the other Coven characters.
Yep.
Except Mrs. Hart, of course. But
no arc for Hart.
It's just too bad.
It's just too bad. Okay. Well, that's the quotes. Shall we talk fic?
Tell me about the fic. The fic that's going to tell me, is Rio Nikki's father?
Oh my god, I know you're on the edge of your seat. Okay, so this ship is coming on in popularity. There are about 3,500 fics for a show that came out like 6 months ago. It definitely will be on the, at least the fem/list of ships for next year. So keep it going.
Get it onto the real list, guys.
Get it onto the real list. Keep writing. So there are about 3,500 fics. I have read Creator, You Destroy Me by Velvet Prayer. What a name. So, this fic serves to answer all the questions you could have about the timeline of their relationship. It goes back to when they meet and carries you through the show and into the future. So, the storyline for them is Rio happens upon Agatha when Agatha's a child, and for some reason Agatha can see her, which, doesn't ever happen. So they have this little moment of connection, and Rio's sort of like, what was that? But she just moves along. And then she comes upon her again in the time that is referred to in the show, where Agatha is come into conflict with her mother's coven and all of that. And she meets her again. They talk to each other, and there's some sort of connection. So then over the years, as Agatha starts killing a bunch of covens of witches to steal their powers, Rio keeps having to come clean up the bodies. And so Agatha starts waiting around at all the crime scenes, and they just are talking, and they like each other, and etc. And they get together. And so she's just visiting her more and more, and then finally the two of them are living in a cottage together and having this lovely idyllic life, spending all their time together. One day, the two of them are having sex, and a soul is formed. All of a sudden, Agatha is pregnant, and neither of them know how it has happened. Rio freaks out because she is like, death cannot have a child. I know that this child will be doomed if it is half me. There's no way that something is supposed to make sense. Yeah, nothing should exist in the world that is half death. So she finds out about this, she freaks, she runs away. She ends up coming back. She reconciles with Agatha. Agatha tells her she thinks it was her, because apparently witches have been known to create souls. And
Immaculate conception.
Agatha thinks she just did it accidentally. And so Rio's like, I hope so. Like, I hope I wasn't a part of it, and we're just going to pretend that's the case and go on that. So they're going through the pregnancy. They're going to be mothers together. Rio's very supportive. She builds her like a baby bassinet. It's lovely. And then we get to the scene where Agatha goes into labor, and as soon as Rio arrives, she knows that the child is doomed. And so you see what happens there. Mm-hmm. She leaves. Agatha starts to raise the kid. Rio is staying away because she's, Agatha's pissed at her for trying to kill her child. And finally, she starts to invite Rio back into their lives. Rio sees the kid and knows that it is half her. Like, as soon as she looks at the kid's eyes, she's like, oh shit, this is my child. So there's your answer to that question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And so they start to become just like co-parents. Agatha lets her hang around. They're spending all this time with the kid together. Agatha eventually wants them to tell the kid that Rio is his other mother. So they're officially like, we're your parents. Then 6 years down the line, so this was like 3 years in, she comes back into the picture. 3 more years pass. It's time for the kid to go. And when Agatha becomes aware of it, they have this horrible fight where she says to Rio, a real mother wouldn't take him at all. And so it becomes clear that, like, she doesn't, see Rio as actually being a parent. Horrible stuff. She takes the kid. They're apart for a long time, like hundreds of years. They don't see each other.
Sure.
And then she just happens upon Rio at one point in, like, the 1980s, and Rio's still pissed at her. They can't interact. And then basically we get to the events of the show. So all that you see in the show happens. And Agatha dies in the scene in episode 8. Rio thinks she's just gone. So Rio is mourning her. And she doesn't know about her becoming a ghost because she's not a part of that story. So she goes back. She's living in the cottage that they lived in together and just like having this sad, my wife is dead life. And then one day, Agatha shows up alive in her garden and is just like, I'm here. And Rio is like, how are you alive? And she's like, it's a long story, but we're going to be together. So they don't explain how she makes herself be alive, though I assume that will happen at some point in the future of the story. But they do get a nice little happy ending. Thank God, because it was really sad and emotional all the way through. It was in Rio's perspective. So there's a lot of her being like, can I even be a mother? Can I experience human emotions? Like, she knows how she feels about Agatha, but she imagines that how Agatha feels about their kid is, like, even more intense, so she feels really bad about all this stuff, even though she's not choosing to reap the child. And she's like, can I even feel grief? And it's like, obviously, yes, dude. You are grieving both the child and Agatha. It was quite lovely. I liked it a lot. Velvet Prayer. Well done. Sounds with your fic. And it's nice to get answers to questions about Nikki's parentage.
I think we did see a quote from Jack Schaefer who's like, in my mind, Rio is Nikki's father, but it's not canon.
But we also saw a quote that was her being like, they asked her, do you know in your head if Rio is Nikki's parent? And she's like, well, since it's not in the show, it doesn't really matter, because if that's a question that gets answered later in canon that I'm not responsible for, then
that'll be the answer.
That'll be the answer, right? But yeah, it seems like the room is pretty sure that that Rio is Nikki's parent. Because in the fact that in the show there's no talk at all about who the father of the baby is, it feels sort of implied.
It does.
Because that is just the saddest version, that she would have to take her own kid.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in the fic that I read where Agatha's like, a real mother wouldn't take him at all, I was like,
come on.
Man. Okay. Yeah. So, is it queer baiting, queer coding, or queer canon?
This one is queer canon. We said it's queer canon.
Sure is. It sure is. Though that didn't stop us seeing weird shit on the internet that was like, it's strongly implied that they were together. History will say that they were roommates, my friends.
Yes, in the way that any relationship is strongly implied.
Oh, goodness.
But no, it's queer canon. Mm-hmm. If you gender swap them, would they be a couple? They are a couple. We don't need to gender swap them.
I mean, probably not, because they're lesbians.
Let's go, lesbian.
Let's go, lesbians. Let's go. All right. That's Agatha all along.
Good times.
Good times.
Pretty fun.
I enjoyed it. That was fun times. Any lingering thoughts? I feel like we tried our best to give the Tony ships a fair shake. given our previous biases. I think probably there's a lot more to go on if we had looked at comic books, but we don't really do that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much comic
There's
books.
so much to look at. And Peggy, Nat, happy we could do that because it was requested. Though when it was requested, we both were like, Peggy and Nat, are they even on screen
talk to each
together?
other? Turns out in What If.
What if?
What if Peggy and Nat talk to each other?
That's truly the what if. What would happen if they ever had a conversation?
And Agatha and Rio was nice because it's the one ship where Steve does not loom large.
There was no Steve at all in this. Neither of them was pining after their long dead Steve. So, all in all, a good time.
Yeah. I enjoyed the MCU. I haven't watched the Avengers in probably years at this point.
Yeah.
Good times.
Fun. And I'm always happy to rewatch Civil War. It's my favorite.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Okay.
The Russos really did a great job. And Marcus and McFeely.
They sure
Although
did.
every time I watch Civil War, obviously, we've talked about this before. The airport scene is the best thing in the world.
Yep.
But when Wanda's throwing people's cars out the parking garage at Tony, every time I'm like, God, imagine being one of those people, and you come back after to the airport in like Berlin or wherever they are, and you're like, my car's just
Your
ruined.
car's just ruined. But I mean, that's the thing with the Avengers and why we're talking about the Sokovia Accords. They wreak havoc everywhere.
I know, but you'd be like, I'm in Germany. What the hell?
Well, they might live in Germany. It's probably people who are from there who left their car to fly away. What do you mean you'd be like, I'm in Germany, what the hell?
Why are the Avengers even there?
Oh, yeah, that's true. But they wreak havoc all over the world. That whole movie is them going to different countries and messing shit up.
It really is. Oh, man. It's just annoying to come back from a trip and be like, I don't even have a car. Oh, gotta file an insurance claim.
Yeah.
Come on,
and then,
guys.
I mean, the insurance companies at this point are trying to be like, the Avengers are an act of God. We don't cover that.
They probably are.
Yeah.
Anyway. Not really
Anyway.
about anything. Just a reaction I have every time I rewatch that scene. I'm just like,
It sucks.
what a hassle.
Really sucks. Okay, what are we talking about next time?
Next time we will be talking about the works and adaptations of the works of S.E. Hinton.
Bet you guys didn't see that coming.
This is going to be a multimedia project.
Yes, it truly is. So people will probably be familiar with S.E. Hinton from The Outsiders, which is her most famous work.
Which we covered on our Oscars podcast.
Yes, indeed. And we were like, this is so gay. It needs to move over to our other podcast. So we are not going to read and watch everything of hers, but we are going to cobble together some S.E. Hinton works to get into. And we may or may not be seeing a play. Just a little teaser.
Oh, well, we'll find out.
Okay. But in the meantime, if you have comments, questions, concerns, you can reach out to
Or
us.
a great Science Bros fic.
Please, we're not kidding. We want your Science Bros fix. Send them to us at ltbkpod@gmail.com. We are on Tumblr at ltbkpod, and we have a Discord that you can find the link to on our Tumblr. If you're enjoying the podcast, tell a friend, leave us a review, and subscribe. Next episode of Let the Boys Kiss will be out in May of 2025.